On behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another, on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
And there you have it. Kamala Harris gave her DNC speech last night where she talked about her upbringing and career, as well as highlighted policies. She, of course, went after Trump, where she talked about the threat of him taking office again.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails.
A storm is tearing up the digital media industry. Only our audience can save us in these difficult times. Help us reach our goal of 100,000 new members at tyt.com/team.
So then she went into more specifics on Trump's policies, what those policies would actually be.
He fights for himself and his billionaire friends, and he will give them another round of tax breaks that will add up to $5 trillion to the national debt. As a part of his agenda, he and his allies would limit access to birth control, ban medication abortion, and enact a nationwide abortion ban with or without Congress. And get this, he plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. Simply put, they are out of their minds.
So I think that was pretty powerful stuff. I like that she was highlighting a lot of the very specific things that Trump wants to do with his next administration, especially since Trump and his team really aren't talking about any kind of specifics as far as policy and what they want to do. All they're doing really is trying to distance themselves from the Project 2025 playbook. Jordan, what were your overall thoughts on this speech? And do you think that these attacks on Trump were effective, or should she maybe have just focused more on her own policies and what she would have done?
So they expected a mixed audience, maybe some undecideds, maybe some disillusioned Republicans would tune in. So hitting Trump and reinforcing what a lot of people feel about Trump, I thought was a smart political play. People who were turned off by Trump after his first term did so because they didn't like the chaos. There are a good amount of people in this country, and you saw some of those testimonials throughout the DNC from former Republicans. They didn't like the way he governed. They didn't like the way he behaved while in office. They thought it was unbecoming and unfit for the presidency. So she's reinforcing that. Polling has shown that that is a key motivator for independents and Republicans to either sit out or vote for Harris. So that's important. The tax cut line I thought could have been handled differently if you were in a situation where you're running as somebody who isn't beholden to corporate donors. She says he wants to cut taxes for his billionaire buddies. And then her next line is the result of that is adding to the deficit. That is, who cares? Like, the average person is not worried about the deficit. The average person is worried about paying their grocery bills. Talk about what that means for a working person. Highlight how that's unfair to you. What do you get? Your tax cuts, if you get any, is regressive, or they are regressive. They have a sunset provision. Corporate tax cuts under the Trump plan are permanent yet again. So I think hitting that in a real populist way would have been a better line. But again, this is somebody who's trying to appease everybody. So she's in a very difficult spot. Overall, we talked about it before, much more positive, much more forward-looking, less scaremongering, and less about herself in a narcissistic way that we saw in contrast with Trump's. Trump is like, I alone can fix it. Oh, look what happened to me. It's 30 minutes about the assassination attempt, just meandering, rambling kind of campaign speech. It was very boring. Trump's was very boring and long. Hers was succinct. Every speech or every bullet point, every talking point mattered. A very, very efficient speech. And again, with the caveat that we laid out in the first segment, the caveat being the militarism, the Gaza line, I thought fell flat and was insufficient.
Yeah, I didn't. I liked your point about the deficit and why would you bring that up? Because especially in a speech like this, where it's going to be more broad, it's not very specific on any one specific issue. The thing with the deficit, that's just a thing that people talk about, but I don't think most regular average Americans don't really understand what any of that means. But they do care about things like gas prices, and they care about their grocery bills, and they care about general inflation and stagnant wages, things like that. The mortgage crisis, everything going on, things that are going to affect their actual bottom lines within their own households, their ability to move upwards in this world, in this country, in this life. And yeah, I think that with Kamala's overall speech, the tone was great. It felt so nice to have a speaker up there who knew how to speak and knew how to engage an audience and deliver on all these points in a very succinct and empathetic way. She's a great speaker, and we can give her that. I think what's interesting now, and this is part of why Trump is melting down so hard, and we'll talk about that in a second, is because compared to Joe Biden, Trump was energizing. He was more energetic. He was more inspiring. Joe Biden kind of would just get out there, say what he had to say, and then move on. He had a little sass to him, but that was the most that anybody would ever really expect from him in terms of anything exciting or motivating. But compared to Kamala Harris, Trump is really falling apart. He looks like an old rambling man, and he is, and he kind of has been. And I think Obama actually touched on this in his speech, that his talking points are stale, they're old, and they have been. He doesn't really have anything new since 2015, really. He's bringing up birtherism again, right? On Fox News, they're talking about birtherism again. It is so old, it is so tired, and there's nothing energizing about it.
Members make a difference here at TYT. You help make the show happen, and we see you in the chat with your loyalty badge. Click the join button to become a member today.